Today, we're going to tackle one of history's greatest and grimmest natural experiments, the Black Death. I mean, this was a catastrophe so huge it wiped out maybe half the population of England. So you'd think, hey, this has got to be a golden age for the workers who survived, right? Basic supply and demand. Well, the real story is way more complicated and honestly, a lot more revealing. So let's just start with that basic economic question. What happens when the supply of something, in this case, people to do the work, is suddenly brutally cut in half? I mean, all the textbooks would tell you that the price of labor, wages, should have gone through the roof. But they didn't. And that's where things get really interesting. And right here, this is the central mystery we're unpacking. The expectation, a golden age for the common worker. The reality, a swift, brutal government crackdown designed to stop wages from rising. So the real question is, why? Why would a king go out of his way to crush the fortunes of his own people, right at the one moment they finally had some power?
Okay, to really get this, we have to rewind a bit. We need to see what the world was like before the plague hit. Because, let me tell you, this was not some peaceful, happy kingdom that was suddenly struck by disaster. It was a world that was already, in a lot of ways, falling apart.
For your average peasant in, say, the 1330s, life was already unbelievably tough. We're talking decades of famine, constant grinding warfare, wages that were stuck at rock bottom, and prices for everything that were sky high. So yeah, the good old days before the plague, they were anything but.
And then, in the summer of 1348, something brand new and absolutely terrifying showed up. It arrived on a ship in the port of Melcombe. People who wrote about it at the time described these painful sores, this raging fever that just tortured people for 3 days until they died. The Black Death was here, and it was about to spread like wildfire.
The writers back then were so terrified. They thought maybe only a tenth of the population was left. Modern historians figure it was probably closer to 30, maybe even 50%. Just stop and think about that for a second. Imagine half of everyone you know just gone in less than a year. The scale of it is it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. But, and this is a huge but, for the people who did survive, this unimaginable horror actually created an opportunity that no one had ever seen before. For just a little while, it felt like the entire world had been turned upside down, and the power was shifting. Just listen to the absolute shock in this writer's voice. The humble, he says, were turning up their noses at jobs. For the first time ever, they had real leverage. They could actually name their price. Triple wages. And the ruling class, the eminent, were completely horrified by this new state of affairs. And you better believe they used that leverage. Suddenly there was all this land available so they could get better deals on rent. Lords were desperate for workers, so peasants could demand and actually get higher pay. A lot of them just up and left, breaking the old bonds of serfdom and heading for the cities to find new freedoms. It was a full-on peasant power surge. But you can probably guess what happened next. This power surge sent a wave of absolute panic through the castles and manors of the powerful. From where they stood, the world wasn't just changing, it was ending. Their entire way of life was under attack. I mean, think about it from the landowner's perspective. This was a total financial nightmare. All their tenants were dying, so their rental income just collapses. And at the exact same time, their number one expense, paying people to work the fields, is suddenly going through the roof. Their whole business model was just completely imploding.
But this was so much bigger than just money. The whole medieval world was built like a pyramid, right? And the base of that pyramid was a huge supply of cheap labor that just did what it was told. Peasants demanding triple wages wasn't just an expense problem. It was an insult. It was a fundamental threat to what they saw as the natural order of the universe.
So, facing this total breakdown of their social and economic world, where do the landowners turn? They turn to the only person powerful enough to stop it, the king. And believe me, he did not hesitate. The king's response was fast, and it just kept getting tougher. First, in 1349, you get the Ordinance of Labourers. This basically ordered everyone to just pretend the plague never happened and go back to 1347 wages. Well, pretty much nobody listened. So in 1351, they passed the Statute of Labourers, which added some serious teeth. Now, local officials could actually arrest, fine, and even throw people in prison just for asking for a raise or for paying one. Which brings us right back to that big question. Why?
Why go to these incredible lengths to stomp on the economic hopes of your own people? Well, the answer really lies in what the king cared about most.
King Edward III's decision wasn't about just one thing. It was this calculated move, really, driven by four big pressures all at once. He had to keep his nobles happy. He had to fund his war in France. He wanted to protect his own bank account. And maybe most importantly, he had to keep a lid on the whole social order. So let's break that down, right? First, keeping the elites happy was job number one. His own father, Edward II, had been overthrown and, well, killed for failing to do just that. So yeah, big motivator. Second, he was neck-deep in the 100 Years' War with France, which was massively expensive, and he needed the nobility's support and their tax money to keep it going. Third, let's be real. The king was the biggest landowner in all of England. He was losing a fortune from these high wages too. And finally, he truly believed, just like his nobles, that the social hierarchy was God's plan. And all of this whole crackdown, sowed the seeds of resentment that would eventually explode into the Great Peasants Revolt of 1381. So here it is, the bottom line. The fact that workers' wages didn't soar after the Black Death wasn't some natural economic adjustment. It was a top-down, deliberate, political choice. A choice made by a king and his allies to protect their own power and their own wealth, no matter the cost to everyone else. And that really leaves us with a question that goes way beyond the 14th century, doesn't it? When a huge crisis hits and completely reshapes the world, creating new winners and losers, who gets to write the new rules? And more importantly, who are those rules really written to protect?